The Edge. I'm Jay Croucher, back from White Sox baseball, the betcast I did the other night. I'm here with Drew Dinsick. We'll talk a little bit of baseball at the top, and then we'll get into some NFL, talk about new offensive coordinators, how they might impact a few teams and their respective markets. But first, Drew, let's spend 20 minutes on the White Sox. Let's spend a little bit of time, though, on Gerrit Cole, who I was watching in their game Monday night, where it seemed like, one, as someone who's been fading Cole all season, I was very happy when Andrew Vaughn hit an early 2-run home run. I thought maybe this is the night. Maybe this is the night where he finally just goes 4 innings and gives up 7, and then he just started dealing, and the White Sox offense is not good at all. But then he gives up 2 runs late, 7 innings, 4 earned, so he drifts a little bit in terms of his ERA. I think his Cy Young odds should drift a little bit as well. And the Yankees are now just a tire fire, really. They're 5.5 back of the wild card as we record. There's been some other happenings in that market as well, with Shane McClanahan reports coming out that he is unlikely to pitch again this season. And so he's done in that race. Nathaniel Valdez out for weeks. He's almost certainly done as well. I mean, other guys in that market have just really fallen off too. Kevin Gausman's been not great for a while. He's fallen. Framber Valdez, I think, is the guy at the moment who offers the most value coming off the no-hitter. If you look at his odds stacked side by side with Cole, Cole definitely has an edge, but it's not that big. And Framber is on a playoff team and Cole is not. And then our man Felix Bautista is still lingering. And then Shohei Ohtani, if Shohei goes on an absolute tear to ends and has the greatest season in baseball history, then I don't think Cy Young is out of the question, but he's got to be pretty long at the moment. But what do you think?
Yeah, I would make the tie. I think you're a little quick to dismiss Gausman. I have seen some Gausman buzz. And if he's carrying an otherwise unimpressive starting set of arms there in Toronto, and if they make the playoffs, then he's going to get some shine from that. So but Cole is kind of the key story, because last couple of weeks as we've been talking, he's been a false favorite and now he's falling, and I can't really point to any examples where at this time of the season, if you're on a team that's falling out of the playoff race and your performance is slipping and you are going from favorite status to third choice, fourth choice, it's very, very rare that turns around and you finish with a strong close and get this award. So I would expect that in general, the chase for Cole is probably over, and this is a Valdez Gausman at the top of the market, with our guy Felix Bautista knocking on the door. If Gausman and Valdez don't finish strong, I'm going to actually start believing that Bautista has a chance. People are talking about it. There's buzz. It's not just us. It's mostly us, but it's not just us that believe in Bautista. And I think the Orioles right now have to be considered, a pretty strong favorite to win the AL East.
Yep. Definitely. I still think Cole should be the favorite, just because he's still got the lowest ERA. He's still got the best B-WAR. He's still got the rep. He's a horse. He's got all of that. He's not going to get blamed for the Yankees season as well, because they do typically win when he is on the mound, though they didn't his last start. But he's just not that good anymore. He's not the same guy that he was in Houston. His strikeout rate is down from 11.5 per 9 to 9.5. I mean, he's got an expected ERA of 3.60, an xFIP of 3.70. He is getting lucky with batted ball stuff, and he's gotten really good at inducing, I think, just ground balls. He's just the king of get to 3-2 and then a ground ball out. He's not putting guys away, but I still think he is the favorite. But then Valdez is right there, and I would have Gausman third at the moment. Gausman, I think, is the most deserving candidate. I think he's lapping the field in terms of FWAR. And his underlying stuff is the best of anyone, but I just don't think that people have bought in enough to the advanced stuff with pitchers. I think back to a couple of years ago when Robbie Ray won the award, when he was, I think on merit, he should have come like 8th, and he won going away just because ERA, strikeouts, and that's just what people look at. So I think Cole's the front runner. But I'd have Valdez second and gaining, and I think Valdez is a worthwhile bet at pretty much every price in the market. He's in the plus 500 range. Gausman, Williams, and then Bautista. I mean, there's still some Bautista 100 to 1 out there. I just can't have that. That's too big. I think he is, to me now, he is clearly, I think, the 4th favorite in the market in a pretty weak field. So hopefully Cole gets lit up for 6 earned runs and the market becomes becomes chaos because that's where the most opportunity rises. All right, before we get into Nathaniel Hackett and the New York Jets with the NFL season quickly approaching, now is the perfect time to get your RotoWorld Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Get ready for your draft and stay one step ahead of your league during the preseason with updated player rankings, profiles, projections, mock drafts, and more. Go to NBCSports.com/draft guide and use code DRAFT2023 to save 20% at checkout. All right, let's talk about my beloved New York Jets. Obviously, huge changes in the offseason. Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback. Don't know if you knew. Nathaniel Hackett is the OC. I think it's really difficult to assess coaching performance in the NFL, but Hackett is probably the clearest evidence we'll ever get of a poor head coaching performance. But I mean, what do you make of the hire? How much do you think it really matters in terms of their offense and the team overall?
It's a pretty easy one to put a giant red flag on. And if that were the only thing that I had reservations about the Jets offense, then maybe we would find reasons to excuse it. But it's not the only thing. And I think because it's in combination with an offensive line where we have questions about the tackle performance and just tackle availability, and we have a skilled position group that's not getting a ton of reps with Aaron Rodgers in the preseason, on top of the fact that it's a little thin after Gerrit Wilson, I think that this Jets offense could have a little bit of a struggle getting off the ground. Breece Hall is not going to be at full strength, it doesn't sound like, until we're at week 4, week 5, and their opposing defenses out of the gate here is absolutely hellacious. They faced 6 of the toughest teams you could ask coming out of the gate, and most of the chaos there is on the defensive side of the ball. The Bills, the Cowboys, these are teams that are clearly in the top 5 in terms of defensive personnel to start. Patriots have always had a scheme that has given the Jets trouble, regardless of who the offensive coordinator was, and that's a defense that I think a lot of people regard as a top 5 unit. And you kind of round out this mix with a Denver who, to me at least, has top 10 personnel, and then the Philadelphia Eagles is probably the first game where you have kind of an equal level of talent with your offense and their defense. So that's probably going to be the bellwether. But that's week 6. You could be 0-5 at that point, or 1-4, and the pressure is going to turn up pretty quickly, I think, on this Jets team. Now, if we talk about Nathaniel Hackett specifically, he's only ever called plays besides last year when he was the offensive coordinator, I think, for 1 season in Jacksonville. He had the play calling responsibilities. It was an uninspiring overall offense in terms of creativity and really getting things done. They succeeded largely because a bunch of their defensive players popped and they had a really easy schedule. And I don't think that that's necessarily comports well with the Jets succeeding offensively, considering how difficult their schedule is. And really, the Hall of Fame game, you cannot realistically take anything away from the Hall of Fame game preseason wise. But what was going on with the procedural penalties, the bonehead mistakes, like that was kind of the added level of the Broncos offense shooting themselves in the foot with self-inflicted 5-yard procedural penalties here and there, not getting plays in on time, not having a very good conceptual arc of what we're trying to do in a given series, given the game state. What are we trying to do? Like, it just was kind of full-on chaos with the Broncos last year, and I think there were whiffs of that in the Hall of Fame game, which is kind of inexcusable. So color me as a buyer beware with the Jets offense overall. And I think, there may be times later in the season where they face a softer portion of their schedule in terms of opposing defenses. And their defense is certainly going to keep them in all of these games. But Aaron Rodgers is going to have a little bit of a career revival here and do some of the work of the offensive coordinator, in my opinion, getting his guys in the right position, getting protections worked out, and just in general communicating well with all of his, fellow offensive players in order for them to succeed. And, so I think this is a pretty easy one where, because of the other red flags and because of what we saw from Hackett last year, I think you have to pretty squarely start with an offensive rating for this Jets that is in the bottom 10 of the NFL, if not the bottom 5.
Okay. Well, I think there's a couple of things here. Firstly, With Rodgers, well, it seems like Hackett is there because Rodgers is there. And it seems like, I don't know, this is completely unfounded, but I would think Aaron Rodgers is someone who would value being able to do what he wants to do in terms of the coaches around him. Nathaniel Hackett, by all reports in Denver, was very amenable to letting people do what they wanted to do. So I don't know. I wouldn't read much into Aaron Rodgers' opinion of Nathaniel Hackett being one of the great coaches. And I think that the other thing is that I fall into this trap a lot where you just player moves team and you just expect them to be more or less the same player. I think about like Rudy Gobert going from Utah to Minnesota. I thought he'd just be the same guy, and he's just not, because it's a completely different system. Doesn't carry over. I think last year it's a bit different. Like JC Jackson, who's maybe the top 3-4 corner in the league in New England, goes to the Chargers. I know he's dealing with some health stuff, but even when he was healthy, he was not good at all. When players change teams and systems, doesn't always work out. Look at Russell Wilson in Denver. Yes, it worked out pretty well for Peyton Manning going to Denver, and also for Tom Brady going to Tampa, but those are the two greatest quarterbacks of all time. Rodgers is in that discussion as well, but I think that with the questions on the offensive line, with just the youth of the offense, with Nathaniel Hackett, I'm not 100% sold on the offense. And I think as well, when you're relying on your defense to make you elite, that's not what you want year to year, which we've talked about. Defense is just more variable. It's more dependent on turnovers and fumbles and that stuff. There are huge elements of luck involved in that. So, look, I think the Jets, they should be a playoff team. They should be a 10-7, 11-6 type of team, I think. But I am a little bit skeptical of them. I think also the main thing there is that I don't understand why the Bills, people seem to be lukewarm on the Bills. Before Josh Allen hurt his elbow, the Bills were clearly the best team in the NFL. Weren't the Bills 2.5-point favorites in Kansas City, like week 6? The 2.5-point favorites in Arrowhead and won. And then Allen, shortly after that, or a few weeks after that, hurts his elbow. And then obviously they deal with a lot of turmoil at the end of the season. And then they play a weird snow game against the Bengals. And I don't know. I think people have just moved on from the Bills too much. I would see them as clearly the number one team in that division. I mean, are you on the same page with me as the Bills? Like, why are they 10-1 to win the Super Bowl?
I mean, because a lot of people stuck their flag in the Bills, myself included, last year preseason, and we saw the best of them early and the worst of them late. And that kind of, that specifically taints your anchoring on a team like that, because, the best we've ever seen the Bills play was their playoff loss to the Chiefs. And, that if that's your peak, then, and that's that far in the rearview mirror, then it's easy to kind of dismiss them. But, a team like the Bills, even up against an elite defense like the Jets, is going to get into the mid-20s, probably the high 20s. And the question is, can the Jets answer on Monday Night Football week 1? And for me, with this offensive coordinator and what we've seen so far, with the offensive line that they're trotting out there, I just don't think it's realistically possible. Bills as a play for week 1 is one of my favorite looks on the board. I think that line should be closer to 3, which is ironically, I think, where it opened and everybody had a big belly laugh thinking it should be closer to pick, but watch it close at 3. So Bills are a bet on for me, particularly as long as they're healthy. The big question for them really is age and some of the defensive scheming now that McDermott has taken over, but that's a really, really small contributor to team success nowadays.
Yeah, I think people forget as well, like Micah Hyde was hurt all of last season. Gabe Davis as well. I think he had like a high ankle sprain that he's played through all year and was never right. So I don't know. I think that they're right there with the Chiefs. Team that's not right there with the Chiefs, the Denver Broncos, another team that we should talk about, coming off of Nathaniel Hackett chat. This is one of the harder teams, I think, just to get one's head around, because I think you have to balance between what expectations were coming into last year, which were pretty high, and as a team that was favored to make the playoffs. Then obviously they have their disaster season. And I think that, we've spoken about this, how this is going to be a really interesting test case for the importance of coaching and how much it matters, because there's not going to be many cleaner situations where you can just kind of isolate as a control what this team was with what we think is a bad coach in Nathaniel Hackett and what we think is a good coach in Sean Payton, because yes, there have been some changes in personnel, but not that many changes in personnel across the board. So where do you sit on the Broncos at the moment? They're pegged as exactly 8.5, their win total. So just the definition of a 500 team.
Yeah, so the Sean Payton head coaching upgrade from Nathaniel Hackett is the biggest delta of any head coaching change in the NFL heading into the season, and I don't think anyone can realistically argue. If you want to make yourself sound smart with an early season take, it is that the Broncos offense is going to look substantially better than what you remember about it from last year, because last year they were in prime time so much in the first half of the season, and everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and people kind of just decided, well, they stink. And Russell Wilson's washed, and this team is not very good offensively. And the reality is it's somewhere in between what was expected from last year and ultimately what people think of remembering the beginning of the season. Now, Sean Payton, he's going to have the ideal start to the season hosting the Las Vegas Raiders, in my opinion. The Raiders are an incomplete defense. They do not have a secondary that can match up with NFL talent, and Denver barely has NFL talent at the skill position group, but it's there. And I think realistically, what we saw Peyton succeed with at the tail end of Drew Brees' career in New England was a lot of the short precision rhythm offense. He got better protection than the talent would have expected from his offensive linemen, and he got more production, from the wide receiving room than you would have expected outside of the elite talent like Michael Thomas. So it's pretty easy to expect specifically Peyton and his offensive vision and his play calling to elevate a lot of these parts on this roster that are below average offensively. And I think you're going to see that right away early on against the Raiders. Week 2 test against the Washington Commanders is a little bit tougher to ask now, because now you are going up against a defense that does have at least an elite D line, if not, a kind of a getting there secondary. But I think Russell Wilson can, if you can marry the concepts that worked with Drew Brees at the end of his tenure into what Wilson is currently capable of doing, that should succeed. And it should kind of fit hand in glove with what defenses are allowing you to do in the NFL right now. So I think it's pretty easy to be bullish on this offense as you currently look at the way that they start their season. Week 1 and week 2 should be wins for Denver at home. And the bellwether is going to be week 3. They go up against the Vic Fangio coordinated defense in Miami. This is a huge, huge test for this team. If Miami goes down there and puts up 20 points, then I think we can basically tell ourselves we have to completely regrade, what the ceiling is for Denver for this season. If Miami and Vic Fangio hold them into the teens, then I think it's kind of the current market rating for what this Denver defense should be, basically is proven out as fair in my mind. Now, if they struggle against the Raiders and if the Commanders completely shut these guys down, now we're in deep trouble territory. Because all of the expected improvements you were getting from Peyton didn't manifest, and now maybe we are like, oh, actually, Russell Wilson is washed, which is a part of the distribution of outcomes for the season. You absolutely have to acknowledge that we could be there come October. So for me, at least, bullish to start the season, expecting them to get off to a very strong start considering scheduling, and then the bellwether is going to be week 3 against Miami.
Yep. I mean, I think if you just look at last season, they were 5-12. I think by the underlying stuff, they were more like a 6-11 team. And then with Russ being better and adding in Peyton and improving the offensive line a little bit, I think that they should be 3 wins better and be a 9-8 type of team. I think the defense should be really strong, starting off with that Simmons, Sertan, safety corner 1-2, as that's probably the best safety corner 1-2 in the league. And then Russ. I mean, Russ was bad last year. I don't think he was quite as bad as people are making him out to be. Like he wasn't. Sure. He wasn't Zach Wilson. He was just solidly below average. And I think that it's perfectly reasonable to expect that he can get back to being the 14th or 15th best quarterback in the league, or maybe even a little bit better.
Yeah, the problem was he was so bad in the primetime games when everyone had their eyes on him.
Yeah,
the Colts game, the Seahawks game, the Niners game, which they won, but it was because of the defense, right? The early season primetime stuff really, really tainted people's perceptions, which should maybe give us a buy low on him this year. But, I think the system that Peyton brings should work in today's NFL. with what defensive coordinators are doing if he can get Wilson to execute it. And he's bringing the discipline along with it. He's not allowing, Wilson to kind of run the show, which I think should, help course correct a bit as well. So count me as a higher ceiling on the Broncos offense than I think market really is capturing.
Yep, I like it. All right, before we get into the Baltimore Ravens, Big Ten Day is this Thursday, August 10th. Break out your Big Ten school colors and celebrate the inaugural Big Ten Day national holiday. Dust off your best gear, share photos of your school pride with hashtag Big Ten Day. Very good. All right, let's talk about the Ravens and Todd Monken. This has been a much maligned offense, I think, or at least there's the idea that Monken is going to come in and revolutionize it and have it certainly have a different flavor. With the Ravens, I find I do this in a lot of sports where I often anchor back to what has happened in the recent past. I think with the NBA, and look, this doesn't work every time clearly, but a couple of years ago in the NBA when the Celtics made the finals, and at one point that year they were 50-1 to win the East. And in my head, I just couldn't shake that, this is the same, relatively the same core that made the Eastern Conference Finals 2 years before that in the bubble and was favored to beat Miami in that series. And now all of a sudden they're 50-1 to win the East, and they've still got Tatum and Brown, who are 2 years older and should be better. And it was a little bit of a different team by that point, but still just anchoring back to the talent. And with the Ravens, I think it's a similar thing where, rightly or wrongly, still can't entirely shake 2019 in my head when they were 14-2 and Lamar is the unanimous MVP and they look like an absolute juggernaut before losing quite in embarrassing fashion to the Titans. And then since then, I mean, if you want to believe that the Ravens are still amazing, you can rationalize it away where they go 11-5 in a season where they were decimated by COVID absences. Then the next year, they're secondary. They just have no secondary whatsoever in 2021. It's like me and you playing corner off the practice squad, trying to cover triple team Devontae Adams because there's just nothing there. And Lamar gets hurt when they were in the mix for the 1 seed, I think, before he went down. And then last year, Lamar gets hurt again. And look, I understand that even when Lamar was playing those seasons, they didn't have the underlying stuff of an absolute juggernaut. But now they have a lot more at the skill positions. They have Todd Monken in. What do you think he does for this team?
This is a really complicated one, and I don't have the answers at all. But it's important to kind of recognize that the organization made some decisions about personnel and populating the depth chart where they starved the offensive talent for the last 2 seasons, in my opinion. They did not really give them an opportunity to grow, to develop, to particularly to expand on the improvements that Lamar himself has made as a passer. And it was frustrating to watch. You saw that the pass protection and really just the offensive line overall kind of it dried on the vine. It was not anywhere close to what we saw in the 2019 season, which was such a huge anchor for that offense. And it was time for a change in terms of scheme and time for an investment in skill position players to supplement the deal that they got done with Lamar Jackson, which has there's enough there that you should expect some serious improvement overall with this offense. Now, the red flags for me are the guys they brought in to really answer the call from the wide receiver standpoint, I think are all a little overrated. Zay Flowers might ultimately end up being your wide receiver 1 by the end of the year in terms of a guy who can actually make game-breaking, plays as a receiver in today's NFL. Expecting, OBJ to do it off of an entire year absence, recovering from an ACL is asking him a lot. And expecting some of the younger guys like Rashad Bateman, who haven't spent a ton of time with the team in the offseason, to make a huge step forward, I think is asking a lot. So this wide receiver group could still very well be bottom 10 in the NFL, which is going to put more stress and more pressure on Lamar Jackson. And, he's going to outlet to Mark Andrews, like always. And there's a very real possibility that even though Monken is potentially bringing in something very new, that it still looks kind of the same. That it's still, well, plays breaking down. There goes Lamar Jackson. Oh my God, I can't believe he gained 20 yards on that play. Did you see that incredible move that he made to get that rushing touchdown? Like he's going to make high level highlight plays that are awesome to watch, that are fun to be part of as a football fan. He's going to be a top 5 quarterback if he plays 17 games, in my opinion, regardless of how the wide receiver group develops. And Todd Monken he's got his work cut out for him, I think, to find ways to get this wide receiver group into advantageous situations schematically. And he did it at the college level, but I really didn't have a good taste in my mouth when he left the NFL. You remember in 2019, he had a 1-year stint with the Cleveland Browns that ended in unspectacular fashion with, Freddie Kitchens took over as head coach. There was a big kind of fight over who was actually coordinating the offense. Monken didn't really feel like he was doing much at all. Ultimately leaves after 1 year to go to Georgia. And then before that, he was in charge of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense with Jameis Winston that was, explosive, exciting, but ultimately not an especially successful, program. So what he did at the college level was great. If he can replicate that with this talent, then the Ravens are going to be pretty unstoppable in the AFC North. They could very well challenge being the best offense with the Cincinnati Bengals just because Lamar Jackson is that dynamic. But I still think ultimately there may be a bit more expected out of this group than we could realistically manifest, considering the offensive line still looks like there's some problem spots there. There's definitely some inexperience, if not some outright not enough talent. And then the same goes for the wide receiver group.
Yeah, I think maybe the difference to last year is at least this year they have more viable lottery tickets. And even if these lottery tickets range from somewhere from plus 175 to plus 800 to hit, there is at least a chance that one of them is going to hit between, say, Flowers and Odell Beckham. And I mean, Devin Duvernay is fine. He's solid. Rashad Bateman is who I think most people have written off, and maybe justifiably, just with the health concerns and what he hasn't been able to do. But I mean, he's still a first round pick, 2 years ago? I wouldn't dismiss that guy entirely because there is still some talent there. Nelson Aguilar, that's probably more in the 15-1 range to hit as a lottery ticket. But then Isaiah Likely as well is there, who should be able to take some strides in year 2. I think Mark Andrews will be better as well this season. He was banged up all of last year. So, I mean, you just need Andrews to be right, and then just one of those receivers to really pop. And then all of a sudden, if Lamar stays healthy behind a pretty solid offensive line and, pretty good defense again, then you're looking at a team that could absolutely win the North and win the Super Bowl even. All right, so with these 3 teams, is there a bet in particular that you like between the Jets, the Broncos, and the Ravens?
I got to say, Bills betting against the Jets offense in week 1 is a bet for me. Betting on the Broncos week 1 against the Raiders is a bet for me, particularly their offense. So team total under for the Jets, team total over for the Raiders is going to be for the Broncos is going to be a fun one. And then the Ravens for me is absolutely wait and see. A couple of tough tests in the first quarter of the season that we're going to find out one way or the other if Monken's pushing the right buttons. I think Lamar Jackson, Offensive Player of the Year, is worth talking about.
Sure. Yeah. I've had this theory that has not been proven correct at all, but I had this theory that was based off of a couple years ago, 2021, before Lamar got hurt. There was a mid-season poll on Offensive Player of the Year, and Lamar won that and didn't win MVP in that poll. And that kind of triggered in my head the idea that running quarterbacks are more likely to win Offensive Player of the Year because it's a way to reward total offense as opposed to passers who, I mean, Mahomes was the MVP last year almost unanimously and doesn't really feature an Offensive Player of the Year consideration because it's viewed as the best non-quarterback award. I still do think there is an angle to potentially reward a historic season. And I know Jalen Hurts kind of potentially could have been that guy last year for OPOY, but I think Jefferson's season was just so great they didn't really factor in. And I think if Lamar was to break the all-time total yards record, or Justin Fields was to do it, or Hurts was to do it, but they weren't quite at the top of MVP, then I think that is interesting, and that Lamar could be the one to break that mold and kind of get the because OPOY for so long was the Drew Brees award, while Peyton Manning was winning MVPs or Tom Brady was winning MVPs, because it's a statistical production award. And if there are records that start to be falling between passing and rushing yards combined, or most rushing yards ever by a quarterback, that kind of stuff, I do think it is viable that particularly Lamar could win that. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on. The other market between these three teams, there's a couple, but I think I'm interested in Pat Surtain, Defensive Player of the Year, around 50 to 1. I wouldn't bet that at the moment, but I just think there's some scope for that defense to be elite and potentially has a path to being regarded as the best defense. And if Peyton is good on the other side and Wilson is a bit rejuvenated, and there are good vibes around the Broncos, and they're 11-6 and a wild card team with the best defense, because Surtain has the pedigree now. And I think that outside of the elite pass rushers, who, I mean, this award just goes to, Hall of Fame candidate pass rushers. It's almost, I think I would probably take, so Parsons, Garrett, Watt, Bosa, I might take those four over the field, honestly, for DPOY, even though it's just four guys. But outside of that group, I think Surtain, along with Sauce Gardner, like those are probably the two next guys along who are super interesting. So that's just one to keep an eye on. All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks for those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please don't forget to rate and subscribe. And also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you tomorrow.